Holy Heavenly Father, we're thankful for Lincoln Christian Church, for the power of this ministry. We're thankful also for an opportunity to worship you today. Father, this world, there's just so much weight that the world can put on our shoulders. And then we hear from you that your load is light. And walking with you is a blessing. And so we ask for that today, that our load would be lightened with you. Father, thank you so much for our guest speaker today, for LC. God bless him. God bless his message. God bless his family and his ministry in this community. I ask all this in the name of Jesus. And everyone said, amen. Perfect. All right. LC Sutton is now employed at the correctional center where he is, where he is chaplain out there. He served at LCU for years. He's a preaching professor. He also, at that time, he did something I really respected. He went out to Eminence, which is a small Christian church outside of town, and for 13 years he was their minister while he was teaching preaching. And I've always admired men who have done that because they're keeping themselves fresh and keeping themselves in the pulpit. L.C. Sutton is married to Dee Dee. She's not in this service, but will be here later. He's got 3 children, and he's a Bears fan, which we're going to forgive him of that. But I want you to give a very, very warm Lincoln Christian Church welcome to L.C. Sutton. Come on up, Doc.
Well, good morning. Well, I can tell this is an early service. Good morning. Time is really important here. I was next door just goofing off, talking to people, and Lauren started worship. I had to take off and come back over here. So I have this joke that I wanted to use, but my wife said I couldn't use it. So I asked her one more time before I left if I could use it, and she said no. Well, I didn't know Ron was going to be here. And my wife is not here, so I'm going to use this joke. So I thought Ron would be in Colorado hiking in the mountains somewhere. And so he said, remember, there is a clock in the back that you have to pay close attention to. And I said, clock? What's a clock? You have to remember, I'm a recovering missionary Baptist. I'm really excited to be here today. The last time I preached here was about 15 years ago. But 35 years ago, something amazing happened to me. I met the love of my life, Deidre, or Dee Dee, as we call her. And we've been married almost 35 years come November. Now, something else happened to us 35 years ago. I became the youth minister in a little country church in Armington, Illinois. Now, Armington has 350 people. In the entire town, there's only 350 people. I had that many people in my gym class in high school. And so it was really fun to go to Armington Christian Church. Now, the story I'm about to tell you is a true story. It's not a preacher story. My wife has heard this story over 100 times. Some of you here have heard this story, but there's a family next door, I believe, that have never heard this story. Jim and Arlene Lane, are you here? I was looking for them next door. That's why I'm late. They're next door. All right, good. So Jim and Arlene Lane were farmers in Armington, and they raised pigs. Now, they had 2 kids who were in my youth group. Colleen and Brian were in my youth group 35 years ago. Now, I'm a city boy from Joliet. So when I went to the farm, I was fascinated by all the pigs they had. They had small pigs, medium-sized pigs, and large pigs. I called them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't think that was appropriate. Now, as a preacher, you want to get to know the people you work with. And so I like making house calls. I like going to people's homes and seeing their pictures and all the awards so I can get to know them better. And of course, they serve me cookies. Now, the Lanes took pigs to the market. The way they did this was Brian would take a semi-truck and load the pigs on a semi-truck and take them to the market. And I thought, well, that'd be a lot of fun. I'll do this. So I said, what time should I be here? They said, 5 o'clock. And I said, in the morning? They said yes. So I show up 5 o'clock sharp. Now, when I get there, I think the pigs will behave like obedient, well-trained dogs. You just say, you, go get on that truck. But it didn't work that way. So Brian gave me what I call a persuader. He gave me this instrument that looked like a pitchfork, had 2 prongs on the end, a handle, and a trigger. And to persuade the pigs to go where you wanted them to, you put this instrument on the pig, and you pull the trigger. It would shock the pig. It would jump, but go where you wanted it to go to. The first time I did that, didn't feel right? But by the end of the day, I was looking for pigs to shock. Now, I had so much fun doing this that I made a TikTok video. Now, I want you to know, when you watch this video, that no animals were harmed in the making of this video. You ready? Watch this. It was 35 years ago. There was no TikTok 35 years ago. I've matured over the last 35 years. I don't go to farms anymore looking for pigs to shock. But with maturity comes aging. I'm not as fit as I used to be. I was never a great athlete, not even a good athlete. I was on the field during the game. That's about it. But I do love the sport of weightlifting. You don't have to be big or small to lift weights. You just lift them, drop them on the floor, pick them up, do it again. So I've always enjoyed weightlifting. We have 2 amazing girls, Jessica and Ashley. And I have 1 son. My wife likes to say if Eric was first, he'd be the only child. And so Eric, as a father, I want to take my son to the gym to teach him how to lift weights. And so we'd go occasionally. Within the last couple of years, he's become hooked on weightlifting. He watches videos. He used to go twice a day before work and after work. He diets, and he's just hooked on weightlifting. Now, I figured I'm 53 here next month. He's 25. I can keep up with him. Now, I started off slow by only going 1 day a week. Now, if you've never been to the gym before, there are 2 parts of the gym. There's the free weight side, which is the young people side, and there's the machine side, which is the old people side. I now work out on the old people side. And so on Fridays, I go with Eric. So we were on the bench one day, and we were working out on the bench, and we finished, and I'm getting up off the bench. Eric came over, put his arm out to give me a hand off the bench. And I said, as lovingly as I could, "Man, what are you doing? This is the gym. You can't help me off the bench." So a couple weeks later, we're working out on the bench, and I decided I'm Mufasa, and he's Simba. And I'm going to push the lion cub today to show him that I'm still Mufasa. And so we go pretty hard on the bench, and I dropped the weights. I knew immediately that there was a problem. I'm laying on the bench, but I can't move. Well, that's not completely true. I could move, but it hurt. And so I knew Simba would come over to help me, but there was no Simba. And so I had to roll off the bench, and I'm on my knees on the bench waiting for Simba to come help me up. He doesn't show up. Finally, I stand up all by myself. Simba comes over and says, "Daddy, are you okay?" And I said again, as lovingly as I could, "Boy, where were you? Didn't you see me in pain?" And he imitated taking the crown off my head and placing it on his head. I understand how Jacob felt in our text today. Our text today is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21. Hebrews 11:21. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on top of his staff. The theme of the series you are in is called What Faith Looks Like. You have already had 6 sermons from Hebrews 11. Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did, 11:4. Noah built an ark to save his family, 11:7. Abraham obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. 11:8. Sarah was unable to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. 11:11. Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice. 11:17. Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. 11:20. Which brings us to our text for today. Jacob blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on top of his staff. Now, perhaps a refresher course is helpful. Jacob, or Israel, as he will become, has 12 sons, and they become in part the 12 tribes of Israel. One of those sons is Joseph, whose mother was Rachel. Jacob loved Joseph so much that he gave him a richly ornamented robe. Joseph's brothers were jealous and decided to kill him. However, his brother Reuben convinces them not to kill him. They decide to sell him to merchants who take him to Egypt, which is in Egypt. He moves from the pit to the palace. Once in the palace, he becomes second in command to only Pharaoh after interpreting the Pharaoh's dreams. He marries Asenat, daughter of Potiphar. They have 2 boys. Genesis 41:50. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenat, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble in all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." Now go back to our text, Hebrews 11:21. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshiped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Now, the actual story of Jacob blessing Joseph's sons is found in Genesis 48. Now, every story has what are called 5 moves. There's a background, there's crisis, there's rising action, there's climax, and there's a resolution. In our story, we have 5 moves. First, background. Genesis 48, verse 1. Sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Next, the crisis. Now, Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Next, rising action. Joseph took them from Israel's knees and bowed respectfully, his face to the ground. Then Joseph took the 2 boys, Ephraim with his right hand, setting him to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand, setting him to Israel's right, and stood them before him. Now you got to get this. We've got Manasseh, who's the oldest, who's on the right, and we got Ephraim over on the left. Next, the climax. But Israel crossed his arms and put his right hand on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, the firstborn. Then he blessed them. Next is the resolution. Now we'll skip this and keep going. So Jacob ends up blessing the wrong son. He placed Manasseh ahead of Ephraim. Sometimes it looks like God has things crossed up. You see, when I went to Armington, I knew other people applied for that job. Other people who were not like me. Other people who were white and not black. And yet God still chose me. God blessed us with the Lang family. I'll never forget one Sunday, I'm in the back teaching Sunday school. They run into my classroom and they said, LC, your father's here. And I'm thinking, how did Daddy find this little country church? I still get lost coming to this little country church. So I go out to see my daddy. Turns out, it was just a black man going through town who wanted to go to church. couple years later, Colleen comes to our house. We're living in married student housing, and we have Jessica. And Colleen came over to visit. She talked to us for a few minutes, and then she took off with Jessica. Dee Dee and I looked at each other and said, I think Colleen just kidnapped Jessica. But she brought her back. You know, sometimes when you get older in life, things change. I remember when I used to wrestle with my father. My father looks just like me. He's a big man. And we used to wrestle all the time, and he beat me all the time. Until one day, we wrestled, and I picked him up off the ground. And I knew I was the king. And Daddy said, that's the last time we ever wrestle. Whenever Eric and I would wrestle, I'd always beat him. I beat him all the time until the last time we wrestled. We're outside, and we're going at it pretty good, and the dog's running around us, barking and yelling like crazy. Dee Dee comes out and says, stop it, you two bulls, stop it. And Eric gets on top of me. Now, when you lose and you can't move, you got to tap out, right? And Eric always tapped out. But this time, something was different. Eric was on top of me, and I couldn't move. And I had to tap out for the first time. And Eric stood up, he took the crown off my head, and he put it back on his head. Sometimes you feel like Manasseh. You think you ended up in the family by mistake. You feel crossed up. I'm not like them. My life is not blessed. Look at all my mistakes and failures. God has placed you in a position not only to be blessed, but to be a blessing. God will take what you think were failures and turn them into experiences to position you for what is next. Corrie ten Boom said, every person God puts in our lives is the perfect preparation for the future only He can see. God put the right people in our lives at the right time. He put the Langs in our life. And the Langs are more than friends, they're our family. I remember one day we spent the night with the Langs, and we woke up early the next day, and I go out in the kitchen, and Mrs. Lang is making waffles in a machine I've never seen before. It was a waffle maker. The only waffles I'd ever seen came out of a freezer you put in the toaster. But she's making homemade waffles. And of course, we had bacon as well. The Langs are like family to us. There's another person who's like a family member to me. Her name is Ma Sitar. Now, I didn't know this until recently. Ma Sitar's real name is Kathleen. But to me, she'll always be Ma Sitar. When I was in junior high school, I went and joined a wrestling team. Now, I gotta be honest, the only reason I joined the wrestling team was because I thought there'd be cages and chairs, and I'd be the next Jimmy Superfly Snuka. That's the only reason I joined the wrestling team. Well, much to my disappointment, there was no cage and no chairs. But I fell in love with the sport of wrestling. Now, growing up, I had 5 really close friends, and of course, John was one of them. Now, wrestling is a winter sport. And at my school, we had practice after school. So it's dark after practice, and I got to walk home. I lived in the projects. My parents got divorced when I was in the 5th grade, and we lived in the projects for a few years. Now, I thought my time was up. Now, there were 2 ways to get home, the long way and the short way. No one wanted to go the long way, so you went the short way. Problem is, my school was in a predominantly white neighborhood. And there was always white boys on their bikes waiting for us when we walked through the woods, because we were all black going to the projects. You never walked home by yourself. And so you got in a group, you walked through the woods. When they started chasing us, we took off running. Now, they never caught us. I don't know why, but they never caught us. And so we'd walk home that way. One day, Ma saw me getting ready to walk home and said, LC, do you want to ride home? I said, well, of course I'd like a ride home. Now, this was in the mid-'80s, and the drug problem was huge in Joliet, where I'm from, and in the housing projects. It was so bad that we had a police station in the middle of the projects. And every night, this white lady would drive through the projects and take me home. And she would do that almost every single night. Ma lived on the other side of Joliet, but she took the time to take me home. She's been my sitar ever since. When my father died, Ma came to the visitation. And I walked Ma down the aisle to meet my mother. And I said, Mama, this is my sitar. In 1999, John committed suicide. After that, I started sending Ma a Mother's Day card every year. And I'd address it to my sitar, and I'd always sign it, your son, LC. A few years ago, Ma said, LC, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. But when I do, I want you to speak at my funeral. In order to bless people, you have to get uncomfortable sometimes. Blessing and worship, those are action words. The Lanes took actions. My sitar took action. Never underestimate the power of homemade waffles and a ride home.